In the vibrant and competitive world of cycling, few athletes captured the attention of fans and fellow riders alike as Moriah Wilson. Known to her friends as Mo, she was a rising star, a young woman whose passion for gravel racing, a grueling and adventurous off-road form of cycling, was matched only by her drive to push the boundaries of what she could accomplish. Born and raised in the small town of Littleton, New Hampshire, Anna's athletic talents were evident from an early age. Skiing, running, and cycling, her natural abilities and fierce work ethic brought her success in each, but it was cycling where she truly made her mark. By her mid-20s, Anna had gained national recognition as one of the top gravel cyclists, with a reputation for both speed and stamina. She had a natural gift for navigating tough terrain, and her graceful yet determined presence on and off the track earned her the admiration of fans, colleagues, and competitors. Despite her rapid ascent in the sport, Anna remained grounded, always valuing the relationships and connections she built along the way. She lived a life of adventure and joy, balancing her athletic pursuits with deep friendships and close family ties. But on the evening of May 11th, 2022, Anna's promising journey was brought to an abrupt and violent end. She was found dead in an East Austin home, the victim of a senseless and brutal act that shocked the world. What began as a promising young athlete's rise to greatness ended in tragedy, forever linked to jealousy, obsession, and betrayal. The events leading up to that night, and the aftermath that followed, left an indelible mark on all those touched by the crime, forcing many to confront the darkest elements of human nature. To fully comprehend the sequence of events that culminated in Anna's murder, one must first understand the relationships at the core of this tragic story. Colin Strickland, a fellow cyclist of national renown, was a key figure. Born and raised in Texas, Strickland was a competitive cyclist whose accolades included numerous victories in both road and gravel racing. Known for his rugged charm and competitive spirit, Colin had carved out a successful career in cycling, and his partnership with Kaitlin Armstrong, a yoga instructor and amateur cyclist, had endured over several years. Though their relationship appeared, from the outside, to be a shared adventure in athleticism and outdoor exploration, it was in reality fraught with complications. Kaitlin Armstrong, a woman with a passion for fitness and yoga, had a fiercely independent spirit. She had built her own career as a yoga instructor in Austin, where she had earned a reputation for her intense classes and commitment to wellness. Her relationship with Colin had been intense from the start. Two strong personalities who shared a love of competition, but who were prone to conflict. By late 2021, their relationship had become strained, and during a brief breakup, Colin began dating Anna Wilson, sparking a connection that would eventually lead to devastating consequences. Though Colin's romantic involvement with Anna was short-lived, the two remained friends after his reconciliation with Kaitlin. To Colin, it was an innocent friendship, a professional connection between two athletes who admired and respected each other. But to Kaitlin, Anna was an existential threat, the embodiment of all her insecurities about her relationship with Colin. Despite his reassurances that he and Anna were no longer romantically involved, Kaitlin's jealousy deepened. She became fixated on the idea that Colin's lingering friendship with Anna was more than platonic. In the months leading up to May 2022, Kaitlin's suspicion escalated into obsession. She began monitoring Colin's movements, tracking his interactions with Anna, and ruminating on their connection. Kaitlin's jealousy, once simmering beneath the surface, had become a boiling force, pushing her closer to a dangerous breaking point. May 11, 2022, began like any other day in Anna Moriah Wilson's life. She had arrived in Austin a few days earlier to compete in a highly anticipated gravel race, one she had been training for intensely. That afternoon, she had plans to meet up with Colin Strickland, whom she had remained close to since their brief relationship months earlier. The two spent the afternoon riding bikes and swimming at Deep Eddy Pool, a popular spot in Austin, before heading to dinner. According to Colin, it was a friendly outing, a chance to catch up and enjoy each other's company. As the evening wore on, Anna returned to the home of a friend where she was staying during her trip. Unbeknownst to her, Kaitlin Armstrong had been watching. Armed with the knowledge of Anna and Colin's earlier meeting, Kaitlin drove to the East Austin neighborhood where Anna was staying. Surveillance footage captured her black Jeep Grand Cherokee in the vicinity of the home just before 10 p.m., moments before tragedy struck. Inside the house, Anna was preparing for bed when Kaitlin arrived. The details of what transpired inside remain murky, but the outcome was tragically clear. Sometime between 9:30 and 10 p.m., gunshots echoed through the quiet neighborhood. Neighbors reported hearing loud bangs, and moments later, Anna was found lying in a pool of blood by her friend, who returned home to the gruesome scene. Anna had been shot multiple times, and despite efforts to revive her, she was pronounced dead at the scene. A bright and promising life was extinguished in an instant. The Austin Police Department quickly launched an investigation, piecing together the events of that fateful night. In the hours following Anna's murder, the case seemed to hinge on a simple yet devastating motive: jealousy. Colin, devastated by the news, admitted to police that he had spent time with Anna earlier that day. His revelation brought Kaitlin Armstrong into the center of the investigation. She had both the motive and opportunity to commit the crime. In the immediate aftermath of Anna's murder, the investigation pointed squarely at Kaitlin Armstrong. Evidence began to mount against her, including surveillance footage placing her Jeep near the crime scene, ballistics evidence linking a gun in her possession to the shooting, and witness testimony from Colin Strickland himself. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, and it seemed only a matter of time before she would be arrested and brought to justice. But then, a critical mistake occurred. Armstrong was brought in for questioning, but was released due to a clerical error related to a previous warrant. Seizing the opportunity, Kaitlin disappeared. What followed was an intense and highly publicized manhunt that spanned the country and beyond. For 43 days, Kaitlin Armstrong evaded law enforcement, embarking on a meticulously planned escape that took her across state lines and ultimately to Costa Rica. During that time, she made every effort to cover her tracks, selling her Jeep, withdrawing large sums of cash from her bank accounts, and altering her appearance. She dyed her hair, changed her clothing style, and assumed a false identity, blending into the small beach town where she eventually settled. Back in the U.S., authorities were working tirelessly to track her down. The U.S. Marshals Service, along with local and federal agencies, pursued every lead. The media closely followed the case, with Armstrong's flight becoming a nationwide sensation. Her ability to evade capture only heightened the public's fascination with the case, as many wondered how long she could stay hidden. But in the end, her freedom was short-lived. On June 29, 2022, U.S. Marshals tracked Kaitlin to a remote hostel in Costa Rica, where she had been living under a false name. She was arrested without incident and extradited back to the United States to face justice for Anna Wilson's murder. The trial. The search for justice. As Kaitlin Armstrong returned to face charges of first-degree murder, the trial became the next chapter in the search for justice. The case, already infamous due to the media coverage of her flight, drew widespread attention as the legal process began. Prosecutors built their case around the mountain of evidence that had accumulated against Armstrong. Surveillance footage, ballistic tests, and witness statements painted a damning picture of premeditated murder. The courtroom was filled with tension as family members and friends of Anna Wilson sat in solemn anticipation. They listened as the prosecution laid out their case, detailing the extent of Kaitlin's jealousy and her obsessive behavior in the months leading up to the crime. According to the prosecution, Armstrong had meticulously planned Anna's murder, driven by an uncontrollable desire to eliminate what she saw as a threat to her relationship with Colin Strickland. For Anna's family, the trial was an emotional roller coaster. Her parents, who had lost their daughter so suddenly and senselessly, spoke through tears about the devastating impact of her loss. They described Anna as a kind, driven young woman whose life had only just begun. Friends from the cycling community echoed these sentiments, remembering Anna as a person who embodied strength, resilience, and compassion. The defense, meanwhile, sought to mitigate the severity of Armstrong's actions, attempting to portray her as a woman pushed to the brink by emotional distress. They argued that Kaitlin had acted out of a moment of extreme jealousy and irrationality rather than cold calculation. But the evidence was overwhelming. Armstrong had fled the country, altered her appearance, and taken extreme measures to evade capture, actions that suggested she was fully aware of her guilt. After days of testimony and legal arguments, the jury deliberated. It didn't take long for them to reach a verdict. Kaitlin Armstrong was found guilty of first-degree murder. In the sentencing phase, the judge handed down a life sentence without the possibility of parole. Justice, in the eyes of the court, had been served. But for those who loved Anna, the outcome could never truly bring her back. The emotional fallout, a community in mourning. The trial's conclusion marked the end of one chapter in the story, but the emotional toll of Anna's murder would continue to reverberate for years to come. For Anna's family, the trial had brought some measure of closure, but it could not undo the profound grief that had followed in the wake of her death. Her parents, siblings, and friends were left with a void that could never be filled, forced to reckon with the loss of a young woman whose future had been so full of promise. They had to navigate the endless grief of knowing that Anna, with her infectious energy, kindness, and ambition, was gone forever. The trial, while offering a sense of justice, could never heal the wound left by her sudden and senseless murder. Anna's fellow cyclists and the broader gravel racing community also struggled to cope with the emotional fallout. Many had looked up to her, not only for her athletic achievements, but for the camaraderie and support she offered to her peers. In the months following her death, races were held in her honor, and cyclists across the country wore black armbands in remembrance of their fallen friend. Tributes poured in, celebrating the life Anna had lived and the legacy she left behind. But amid the memorials and vigils, there lingered a profound sense of injustice, a lingering question that haunted those closest to her. How could such a bright, promising life have been taken so tragically? Colin Strickland, too, found himself at the center of a storm of grief and guilt. While he had not been directly involved in Anna's murder, his relationship with both women had set the tragic events in motion. His decision to maintain a friendship with Anna, despite Kaitlin Armstrong's growing jealousy, was a choice that would haunt him for the rest of his life. In the aftermath, Colin's reputation in the cycling community was shattered. He retreated from public view, racked with guilt over what had happened, knowing that his actions, however unintentional, had played a role in the tragedy. In the months and years that followed, Anna Wilson's family worked to preserve her memory, establishing foundations and scholarships in her name. They channeled their grief into something positive, determined to ensure that Anna's life, though cut short, would continue to inspire others. The cycling community, too, rallied to keep her legacy alive, dedicating races and events to her memory. Reflections: the dark power of jealousy and obsession. Anna Wilson's murder, while deeply personal to those involved, also served as a broader cautionary tale about the destructive power of jealousy and obsession. Kaitlin Armstrong's descent into paranoia and rage revealed the dangerous extremes to which unchecked emotions can lead. Her jealousy, which began as mere suspicion, had escalated into a fixation that ultimately cost Anna her life, and ruined Armstrong's own in the process. Psychologists who examined the case pointed to the profound ways in which jealousy can distort perception. For Kaitlin, her fear of losing Colin Strickland's affection transformed into an all-consuming obsession. She viewed Anna not as an innocent woman with her own life and aspirations, but as an obstacle standing between her and the man she loved. As her jealousy grew, so too did her capacity for violence, culminating in a cold and calculated act of murder. Experts have long understood the role jealousy can play in relationships, but the Kaitlin Armstrong case underscored just how dangerous that emotion can become when left unchecked. Jealousy, particularly when it festers in silence, can lead to irrational thoughts and actions, distorting reality to the point where a person is willing to destroy lives, both others and their own. The media's role in amplifying the tragedy also cannot be ignored. From the moment Kaitlin went on the run, the case became a national spectacle, drawing widespread attention not only for the crime itself, but for the dramatic manhunt that followed. News outlets followed every twist and turn in Armstrong's escape, turning her into a figure of fascination and intrigue. Her flight to Costa Rica, her attempts to evade capture, and her eventual arrest were covered in exhaustive detail, turning the case into something of a media circus. But amid the headlines and the public's morbid curiosity, the core truth remained. A young woman had lost her life due to the irrational and violent impulses of another. The media attention, while understandable, often obscured the deeper tragedy: the senseless loss of Anna Moriah Wilson. The aftermath, a lasting impact. In the wake of the trial and sentencing, the lasting impact of Anna Wilson's murder could be felt in countless ways. For those closest to her, the grief was raw and enduring. Her family struggled to move forward, finding solace in preserving her memory through charitable work and initiatives that reflected Anna's passion for sport and community. Her friends and fellow athletes found ways to honor her through their own races and events, keeping her spirit alive in the world of cycling. But the effects of the crime rippled outward as well, touching not just the cycling community, but broader society. The Kaitlin Armstrong case sparked conversations about the dangers of jealousy, the importance of mental health, and the ways in which intimate relationships can turn toxic when communication and trust break down. It became a symbol of how unchecked emotions, when allowed to spiral, can lead to devastation. Colin Strickland, too, was left to reckon with his role in the events that unfolded. While he had no direct hand in the crime, his decisions had played a pivotal part in the tragedy. His relationship with Kaitlin Armstrong and his continued friendship with Anna Wilson had created the circumstances that ultimately led to Anna's death. Though he bore no legal responsibility, the emotional burden was one that would weigh on him for the rest of his life. In the years following Anna's murder, Colin largely withdrew from public life, his cycling career derailed by the events that had transpired. He grappled with the guilt and sorrow of knowing that, in some way, he had been a catalyst for the tragedy. His silence in the aftermath spoke volumes. A man haunted by what had happened and by the choices that had led to it. For Kaitlin Armstrong, the consequences were final and severe. Sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, she would spend the rest of her days behind bars, a stark reminder of how jealousy and obsession can spiral into irreversible violence. Her life, like Anna's, had been irreparably changed in the span of a few fateful hours. But for Anna's family and friends, the focus remained on ensuring that her life would not be defined solely by her death. They worked tirelessly to keep her memory alive, celebrating the vibrant, adventurous spirit that had made Anna such a beloved figure in the cycling world and beyond. Through scholarships, foundations, and races held in her honor, they sought to turn their grief into a legacy of hope, one that reflected the best of who Anna had been and the promise her life had held. Conclusion: a legacy of loss and love. As the years pass, the memory of Anna Moriah Wilson endures, a testament to a life lived fully, passionately, and with purpose. Her murder remains a source of deep sorrow for those who knew her, but her legacy goes beyond the tragedy. Anna's spirit continues to inspire, a reminder of the power of perseverance, kindness, and determination. The Kaitlin Armstrong case, while tragic in its own right, serves as a sobering example of how jealousy and obsession can distort reality and lead to unimaginable consequences. It is a story of lives destroyed by emotion, a stark cautionary tale about the dangers of letting fear and insecurity fester unchecked. In the end, Anna's legacy is not defined by the violence that ended her life, but by the love and light she brought to those around her. Her family, friends, and the cycling community will forever remember her as the bright, shining star she was, a young woman whose impact will continue to be felt for years to come. The road ahead may be filled with sorrow, but through their grief, Anna's loved ones have found strength. They carry her memory with them, ensuring that her story, both her triumphs and her tragedies, will never be forgotten.